Next, good news for the Newcastle Knights as they end a painful 7-match losing streak in Brisbane. Good news for the Newcastle Knights on Friday. Their 7-match losing streak gone as they managed to beat the Canterbury Bulldogs 16 points to 6 as they started the Magic Round of the NRL in Brisbane on Friday. It was just incredible for the Knights, who were just too strong for their rivals right throughout the game. The first points came from the Knights, and they were leading 2-0. Then the Knights scored right on the first half. And it certainly was. They were getting the Bulldogs like flies as Newcastle quickly piled more pain on them. Meanwhile, the Bulldogs fought back as well.
Scoring tries here at Suncorp Stadium. Make that 20, Bossy, in 19 games. Well, he had to wait a while to get his first for Canterbury. Now he's got 6 of them and a couple of doubles. He's turned around Dominic Young. What a moment that was for Dominic when he realised, oh boy.
But in the second half, things got worse for Canterbury as they were unable to score more tries, but thankfully the Knights had to score more tries right in the second half as the red and blue ended up scoring, and also a push and shove occurred. And of course, Newcastle were back on the attack. But with the best ones coming to good grips, Newcastle had one more to score a try. The ref had to have a check. But however, it was no try. But finally, Newcastle had to whip the Bulldogs out. And of course, it was a battle for the wooden spoon. 15th versus 16th. Finally, the Knights had something to cheer for their fans as they scored in the last minutes of the second half. And of course, the Knights knew what they had to do. They had to win a match. And of course, the 7-match losing streak was all but over. Meanwhile, later that night, there was also a win for the Brisbane Broncos, who secured a 38-0 win over the Manly Seagulls. It was fantastic for for Brisbane, who were too strong for their rivals up at Suncorp. Meanwhile, on Saturday, the The South Sydney Rabbitohs secured a win over the New Zealand Warriors, while the Gold Coast Titans beat the St George Illawarra Dragons, and the Penrith Panthers secured a win over the Melbourne Storm, bringing the Storm's winning streak to a crushing end. After the break, the Raiders secure a win over the Cronulla Sharks. To other amazing news, and of course the Canberra Raiders also won, securing a 30-10 win over the Cronulla Sharks. It was just fantastic for Ricky Stewart's Green Machine, who were just too strong for their rivals right throughout the game. It was a win that the Raiders just wanted, and a try started right from the very beginning. And it certainly was. And it was right up at Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane. More tries kept on coming and coming, and also coming. And of course, goal kicks were also coming around. Meanwhile, the Sharks were struggling as the Raiders held on to fight back. Tries were scored, and also celebrations kept on coming up for the Green Machine. Even though the Sharks tried to have a comeback, but it was all too late. Also, the Green Machine had 2 players in the bin. That was all because a couple of the Sharks players were knocked out. That's what was going on indeed. Definitely not a good start for the Raiders in the second half. But Cronulla was fighting back indeed, but definitely not for long. Even though the Sharks scored, it was just too late. Thankfully, more good news for Ricky Stewart's Raiders. The Raiders had to have a comeback in the final few seconds. But despite having 2 players sent to the bin, they had to stop Cronulla from scoring. But not for long, the Raiders had to score in the final few minutes of the second half, with the Green Machine coming back. And it certainly was. Walford scored in traditional Green Machine colours. And of course, with Ricky Stewart jumping and also getting overexcited as well. And thankfully, the Raiders celebrated by scoring one more try with a 30-10 win. One of the latter games, yesterday, the Sydney Roosters had a win over the Parramatta Eels, 31-24, while the North Queensland Cowboys secured a 36-12 win over the West Tigers. To ice hockey, the Newcastle North Stars have continued their undefeated run, defeating the Sydney Bears at the Hunter Ice Skating Stadium over the weekend, 7-1. It was fantastic for the North Stars, who were too strong for their rivals right up on Saturday night. After the break, we'll look at round 5 of Newcastle and Hunter Rugby League. To Newcastle and Hunter Rugby League, and the match between Orimba and Maitland was called off because of wet weather. But however, the match between Dora Creek and Woodbury went ahead as Dora Creek took down Woodbury 26-0. Meanwhile, the match between South Newcastle and Dudley was also called off because of the wet weather. In the ladies' league tag of the Newcastle and Hunter Rugby League, the matches between Morpeth, Tea Gardens and West Wallsend and Dudley were all called off because of the wet weather. But thankfully, the matches between Awabakal, Shortland, Cardiff and Raymond Terrace all went ahead, as Awabakal took down Shortland 54-0, while Cardiff secured a win over Raymond Terrace. To round 4 of the Hunter Rugby Union, and of course the match between Lake Macquarie and the Hamilton Hawks was called off because of the wet weather, while the Southern Beaches had the bye. Meanwhile, the Wanderers secured a 29-22 win over Maitland, while Mayweather Carlton secured a 64-7 win over Nelson Bay. Meanwhile, in the other one, the University of Newcastle secured a victorious win over Singleton, 82-7. To the NBL 1 East competition, the Newcastle Falcons men and women's side have secured back-to-back wins over the weekend right up in Newcastle. It was fantastic for the Falcons, who were too strong for their rivals over the weekend. If it's one that you need to see, it's the clash between Newcastle and Sutherland in the NBL 1 Women's East clash. And of course, it occurred in Newcastle over the weekend. The Falcons had to quickly score a lot of points.
Again, good ball movement by Newcastle. Kingham for 3.
And it sure was. Newcastle led 18 points to 12. Now 24-22 became good. Just in time. And of course now Newcastle won 40 points to 35.
Sutherland did well and found the open player. At some point.
It was still the same.
Unfortunately missed both free throws on that occasion.
When Sutherland threatened to strike back. But not enough though, as Newcastle scored yet again.
I was just going to say another 3-pointer by Newcastle.
And it certainly was. Newcastle led by 2.
Another offensive rebound from Newcastle. Short shot clock. Keegan nails the 3.
45-41. As it certainly was.
You can't leave her alone. One of the best.
And they certainly couldn't.
Will and can. Pick and roll. Nice feed. Nice. Yeah. Very nicely done. Yeah.
The home side was just too strong for their Sutherland rivals.
Space for herself belonged to.
The Falcons were now leading 50-43.
Jenna with the big three.
54-46 was of course Newcastle's score.
Megan Johnson.
And of course the Falcons had a good chance to have a comeback.
Took a fair bit of a bump then. Evans
And they certainly did. Just that in the fourth and final quarter when they led 56-48.
She hasn't necessarily shot the ball well from the perimeter.
But it wasn't long before
There's that
before Sutherland tried to have a fight back, but it wasn't enough, as Newcastle secured the match winner,
tough finish. She had some company, got the ball down. And there's full time
65-55.
Newcastle winning the fixture 65-55.
Up next, it was the Falcons NBL 1 East turn. It was the Newcastle Falcons men's turn. They were leading 19-15 against the Sutherland Sharks, right up at the basketball stadium at Broadmeadow, which is the Falcons' home. The Falcons led 26-24 at the time.
Great tough, mate.
Great defense.
It was a good effort.
And of course, the scores were tied 26-all.
Hutchison with the board. And Sutherland off to the races.
And I think
As Sutherland threatened to grab away the lead,
to go on the road and then get here, and like you said, we pull a good crowd.
thankfully,
They're definitely dropping, and they have the ability to fire away from the outside.
thankfully Newcastle had to do something, and it was a comeback.
That's the role he was looking for.
Newcastle were now at 42-52. Now they were having a fight back, waiting to come along. Now Newcastle was on 53,
Some beastie.
And that's great, you know.
Didn't make
and the lead was changing into a lot more different.
I think Newcastle have worked out the way to slow
And they certainly were.
down is by
Newcastle certainly had to score.
more patience on offense.
Now they're leading 58-57. Now 62-6.
UCLA action and the pick and roll between
And look
Beastie
at
and
that
Cherry.
pass, Marty. It's fantastic.
And they found the open shoot and
As they scored plenty more goals and slam dunks.
Beastie and Cherry in the pick and roll.
And of course there were more after that, as Newcastle led 73-71.
Woodhill getting to front of rim. Nice finish.
It's been tough for them. It's been
As the Falcons continued scoring the best of the best.
Newcastle rotated well there defensively. There's that.
With a huge victory,
Newcastle got to find those shooters. They've got to huddle score. Someone unable to score. But the clock's ticking all these times.
with the clock ticking, and of course Newcastle had to do something. They beated their rivals,
and everyone that's got on, they've done what they needed to do, done their job.
but with not enough time left,
So Newcastle pretty well just thrown it up in the air.
the Falcons had to defeat Sutherland's with a 78-75 win. After the break, we'll wrap it all up with the results of the AFL Hunters Central Coast men's and women's competitions, as well as the Hunters NPL and WPL competitions. To the AFL Hunters Central Coast Black Diamond Cup men's competition, and Warners Bay secured a huge 114-57 win over Maitland. while the match between Killarney Vale and Newcastle City was called off due to wet weather. Meanwhile, in the other game, Cardiff secured a win over Telgor Avoca, and Singleton had the bye. In the women's version of the Black Diamond AFL, and of course, Warners Bay had a 89-31 win over Maitland, while the match between Wyong and Singleton was forced to be at 90-0, as it was forced to be called off due to wet weather. And so too was the Killarney Vale Newcastle City clash. But however the match between Cardiff and Newcastle, the match between Cardiff and Telgor Avoca went ahead, as the Cardiff Hawks defeated Telgor Avoca 92 points to 14. Finally, this afternoon in the Hunters NPL men's competition, the matches between the Lambton Jaffers and the Edgeworth Eagles, as well as Cooks Hill United and Valentine FC, as well as Lake Macquarie and Maitland, were called off due to wet weather. But however, the matches between Newcastle Olympic and Adamstown went through, as Newcastle secured a win over Adamstown. Meanwhile, Charlestown had a draw over Broadmeadow. In the Women's Premier League, the matches between Newlambton and Warners Bay, as well as Maitland and the Mid-North Coast, were both called off because of wet weather. Meanwhile, the matches between Charlestown Azuri and Newcastle Olympic, as well as Adamstown, Rosebud and Broadmeadow Magic went through, as Charlestown secured a 1-0 win over Newcastle, and also Adamstown secured a 1-0 win over Broadmeadow as well. And that's it for the latest. And don't forget, I'll be back tomorrow. That's it for now. And don't forget, from all of us here, goodbye.